Experts are warning that Donald Trump's $1.8 billion anti-weaponization slush fund, it might be one of the most corrupt acts in American history. And that was also before Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche was unable to assure lawmakers that payments will not be made to child molesters, cop beaters, GOP campaign donors, and even Republican lawmakers.
The fact that I used to be President Trump's lawyer is just a fact, but I'm the Acting Attorney General. So don't say the President's former personal lawyer will do something. The Acting Attorney General will do something.
Mr. Attorney General, you are acting today like the President's personal attorney. And that's the whole problem. You have a whole banner of his face hanging over the Department of Justice, and you and everybody else walks under it.
Right, because as I briefly touched on yesterday, in January, a year into his second term of the presidency, Trump sued his own Treasury Department for $10 billion. And he, along with his sons, alleged that the department failed to take necessary steps to prevent a former IRS employee from leaking their tax returns, even though that actually happened during his first term as president. And thanks to those leaks, along with reporting from outlets like the New York Times and ProPublica, we learned about how little Trump and other billionaires like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos paid in taxes compared to their overall wealth. The guy who leaked Trump's tax records, along with those of thousands of others, still serving out a 5-year prison sentence. And then as far as Trump, he struck this deal with his own Department of Justice to drop the lawsuit along with 2 other cases that he had filed seeking hundreds of millions of dollars from the government, right? And so in exchange, you had the Trump DOJ announcing its plan to create this so-called anti-weaponization fund worth $1.776 billion, which of course is a nod to the year of the nation's founding. And the fund's purpose is to pay off people who have been victims of weaponization by past DOJs. But really, these so-called victims, they're expected to include prominent supporters of Donald Trump, former members of his staff, and thousands of people who stormed the Capitol as part of the violent mob seeking to overturn the results of the 2020 election, most of which were already pardoned by Trump in one of his first acts of his second term. And in fact, even before this announcement, several hundred Jan 6ers, they already filed claims seeking compensation. And actually, since Trump's return to the White House, the DOJ has already reportedly paid at least $8.5 million to settle legal claims brought by his allies who allege that they were improperly targeted by federal law enforcement. And so in March, for example, it settled a lawsuit with Michael Flynn for more than $1 million after he sued the FBI for $50 million. And now you already have Mike Lindell, the MyPillow guy, telling CNN that he expects to be compensated via the fund, saying, "MyPillow is the most attacked company in history. My employees that own the company deserve to be made whole." And as far as, who's going to get this money, all of that's seemingly going to be handled with really no oversight and decided entirely outside of the normal processes for negotiating legal claims against the government. The judge who agreed to dismiss Trump's case noted that his motion to do so did not reference any settlement or include a stipulation of settlement. Or in other words, right, the terms of this agreement, they weren't filed as part of the case's public court record, so no one really knows exactly what they are. And even what the Trump administration is admitting publicly is far from reassuring. They say that the fund will be controlled by a group of 5 people who just so happen to be selected by Blanche, who is Trump's former personal criminal defense lawyer. And actually, not only that, anyone that is appointed to this panel, they can be replaced by Trump at will. Also, any payments, they reportedly have to be made before December 2028, which is, of course, the end of Trump's term, and any remaining money has to be returned to the government. And while Trump and his family, they'll reportedly be barred from getting any of this money, the IRS has now also been barred from pursuing tax claims against Trump, his family, or his businesses, including those currently pending. And that's according to a 1-page document signed by Blanche and quietly posted on the DOJ's website today, right? Separate from the 9-page document posted yesterday that the department claimed explained the settlement. And altogether, this seems to be one of Trump's most brazen efforts to reward himself, his supporters, and his allies. So we have the head of the nonprofit Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington saying, "This is one of the single most corrupt acts in American history." And with that, the announcement of this fund has notably coincided with the resignation of a top government lawyer by the name of Brian Morrissey. But he's stepping down from his role as the Treasury Department's general counsel only 7 months after his confirmation in the Senate. Now, he hasn't publicly commented on his reasons for quitting, and in his resignation letter, he reportedly said that he had been grateful to work for Trump and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. You also had a Treasury spokesperson saying in a statement that Morrissey had served the department with both honor and integrity, and adding, "We wish him all the best in his next endeavors." But still, despite all that, the timing of Morrissey's resignation, it does stand out. And that's because the Treasury Department is the one responsible for depositing the $1.776 billion into the anti-weaponization fund. Right, it first has to approve what's known as the Judgment Fund, which is an uncapped pot of money that's available for the federal government to pay settlement claims without needing congressional approval. And actually, with all this, in testimony before the Senate subcommittee today, you had Blanche claiming that he didn't know why Morrissey resigned. He also acknowledged that the so-called anti-weaponization fund is unusual, but claimed that it wasn't unprecedented. Or with the DOJ likening the fund to a $760 million fund that was set up during the Obama administration to deal with claims of discrimination made by Native American farmers and ranchers. Blanche also claimed that the settlements paid by the fund would not be limited to Trump supporters or based solely on actions of the Biden administration. And he pledged to make public quarterly reports detailing any settlements that are paid, saying, paying, the claims that are awarded, and the amount will surely be made public along the way. Though notably, the agreement establishing the fund reportedly says that records will remain confidential, leaving it all up to the Trump-controlled panel overseeing the fund to decide what, if anything, to disclose about their processes for granting or denying claims. That said, though, Blanche openly admitted that Trump campaign donors wouldn't be excluded from seeking compensation. And he also suggested that Republican lawmakers whose telephone records were seized in 2023 by special counsel Jack Smith might receive money. And also, in some cases, he kept on insisting that he couldn't say for sure whether certain people would be disqualified since it'd be up to the panel. You know, the one whose members he gets to decide. And actually with that, besides what we showed earlier, he had this exchange with Senator Chris Van Hollen over the question of whether Jan 6 riders could have claims paid.
This is an outrageous, unprecedented slush fund that you set up. Simple question, will individuals who assaulted Capitol Hill police officers be eligible for this fund?
Well, as it makes plain, anybody is
just let me know if they're eligible for the fund.
As was made plain yesterday, anybody in this country is eligible to apply if they believe they were victim of weaponization.
Mr. Attorney General, let me ask you this. Are there going to be rules that say that if you've assaulted a Capitol Hill police officer or committed a violent crime, you will not be eligible? Why not make that a rule?
I expect that, because I'm not one of the commissioners setting up the rules, I expect
that there will be rules. You're appointing 4 of the 5 members, aren't you, Mr. Attorney General?
Pardon me?
You're appointing 4 of the 5 members.
I am appointing all 5 members.
Set up.
And Van Hollen, he also took it further, asking about a specific rioter who's since been convicted on multiple child sex abuse charges.
There's also an individual who, after being pardoned by the president, went on to molest 2 children. And that person actually tried to buy the silence of these children by saying that he would pay them some of the funds that he was hoping to get from your slush fund. Can you commit to making the rules so that that person is not eligible for a payout under this fund?
Well, you're obviously lying in your question because there's no way that this person committed to that. But the slush fund, as you call it, which is not, didn't exist.
I'm sure,
but I can commit.
Mr. Attorney General, don't ever do that again. I am reporting
what again?
What he said. He said on the expectation that he hoped to get some of the funds from a payout. He's been hearing
you said from the slush fund, Senator, and that didn't exist when he said that.
And Blanche is technically correct there, because while this guy did reportedly try to bribe one of his victims with money that he claimed he'd receive as part of the restitution for January 6 defendants, this did happen several months ago. So yes, it seems unlikely that this creep was specifically referring to money from a fund that didn't exist yet. But also, like seriously, Todd? So I guess also his reaction shouldn't be all that surprising considering his handling of the Epstein files, which of course is an issue that also came up repeatedly today. With Van Hollen, for example, Blanche claimed that he had met with survivors and their lawyers, but several had reportedly denied that. And then he had this interaction with Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon.
I want to go on to the Epstein investigation. Is it closed or open?
When you say the Epstein investigation, what are you referring to, Senator?
Well, the FBI said in last year in July that it had closed the Epstein investigation. So I'm just using their words. Is it open or closed?
I don't believe the FBI said that.
Well,
I mean, if you're referring
you're head of the Department of Justice. Is the Epstein investigation open or closed?
But I guess I don't understand what Epstein investigation means. The investigation
let me put it
into Jeffrey
differently.
Epstein himself, yes, he's dead. Any investigation into potential other bad guys will always be open if we have evidence that supports in any way, shape, or form that we can make a case.
But of course, there are many who feel like there's already enough evidence to continue investigating. And ultimately, all of this is sort of connected, at least in terms of what it says about the current Department of Justice, which is actually something you had Rhode Island Senator Jack Reed hitting on with his time on the clock.
You know, this whole hearing, I think, is exposing something, which is, to me, very frightening. You're a very gifted lawyer. But from my perspective, you have very little faith to the Constitution and the people of America, and you're the president's consigliere.
Your perspective is completely wrong, Senator,
Well,
respectfully.
I think the facts will prove me right.